And here we are outside Newcastle House, near Ballymahan in County Longford. This was the house of the King Harman family. And here to tell us more about it is Paddy Whelan, who hails from Ballymahan, which is about 2 miles from here. Paddy, what can you tell us about Newcastle House?
Well, the earliest reference we have to Newcastle House is circa 1680, when Robert Chopin, a Huguenot, purchased the house from Gerald Fitzgerald, the 17th Earl of Kildare. Now, Newcastle House was built in a period between 1680 and 1922. One of the oldest stately homes in South Longford. Robert Chopin built the centre portion, the centre block of the house, to a height of 2 stories. And he seems to have sold Newcastle House around 1700. And it was purchased by a Scotsman called Anthony Shepherd. Anthony Shepherd died in 1738, and the house and estate was inherited by his sister Frances Shepherd, who married Captain Wentworth King Harman of the Battle Axe Guards in Carlow. On his death, as I mentioned previously, in 1738, the house and estate then was in the possession of the Harman family, and it is from this point that the Harmans take over. Wentworth Harman built a slight portion of the house, not very, very much, but we go on to the late 1700s or early 1800, when we find that Lawrence Harman, King Harman, who was possibly the grandson of Wentworth King Harman, and he was the great builder. Now, Lawrence Harman King Harman, he built the top story of the centre block, the yellow brick chimneys, the stable yard, and he also built the 2 wings.
So, Paddy, you're basically saying that originally, I mean, the first part of Newcastle House was literally the centre portion here, neither of the wings,
no,
just up as far as the second story.
Yes. And we have then the building then, well, it's not really, there's no evidence as to who built the side wings, but it was possibly Wentworth King Harman who built the side wings.
And the top story?
No, the top story was built by his grandson.
Right.
Lawrence Harman, King Harman.
Right.
He was, of course, the great builder, and he also built the lovely chimneys you have on the top there. And this yellow brick chimney, you see, and he also built then the lovely yard here,
so
the whole stable yard.
It was Lawrence who made it the impressive building.
Lawrence, it's Lawrence that really made it.
Right.
And that was done in 1851. Now, the original building was on a level, 1 story below the present level. And Lawrence Harman King Harman, in his old age, was afflicted with trouble with his legs, probably arthritis, and he couldn't surmount the steps that went from the original level to the present hall door.
Yes.
So he terraced the house right down from the entrance gate at the road, up the whole way. It was brought in by horses and carts and donkeys and carts, all the clay, and it was raised up to a level that he could enter the front door without having to negotiate the steps.
Right. So Most people would expect a house of this type to have steps, so it originally had.
It had steps.
Until the middle of the 1800s.
Middle of the 1800s, you see.
Yes.
And due to this gentleman's indisposition, they had to facilitate him.
Right.
So I suppose they brought the mountain to Muhammad.
Right.
Now, the next building then that took place was the annex. Now that is at the rear of the right side building there. And that was built in 1922 from stone that came from Mitchelstown House in County Cork. The Kingstons were related to the Harmons, you see.
Yes.
That's where the king came in. And you find the coat of arms there of the Harmon family and the Kingston families on the annex wall. Now, the coat of arms over the main door there, that's the King Harmon coat of arms and the King Harmon motto, which reads Spes tutissima Coelius. Now, if my memory serves me correctly and my Latin is still with me, the translation that would be possibly greatest hope in heaven.
Right.
I hope it held good for them.
Yes, yes.
Now, the King Harmon families, the various members of the King Harmon family, they lived up here until 1949, when the last of the Harmons in Ballymahan died. He was Colonel Wentworth Alexander King Harmon. I'll tell you more about that when I'm telling you about the genealogy of the King Harmon family,
Right.
you see. The lands were sold to the Department of Forestry in 1934.
Would that have been the domain?
The domain.
The domain
Yeah,
of
this
the
is the
estate?
point I'm coming
Yes.
to now.
Yes.
Now, there's a big difference, you see. There's a lot of talk about landrism. And you have a rather black picture painted in most areas and with most families, but inside the domain wall, now the domain of this estate would be around 1,500 acres, and that was for the domestic use of the building.
Right.
Now, there are points we must never forget is this, that the domain, you see, it gave great employment to a very large number of people. And the Harmons housed their employees. Most of them were housed on the estate, which meant that they had a home and a secure job as long as they lived.
Yes.
But the real cancer was outside the domain wall, where you had the tenant farmer. And he had no rights whatsoever until Michael Davitt got the three rights: freedom to sell, fixture of tenure, and fixture of rent. The three Fs.
The three Fs.
The
Yes.
three Fs. Now, that was the big cancer,
Yes.
that they could be turfed out on the side of the road without a moment's notice whatsoever.
What kind of landlords, generally speaking, were the King Harmons? How were they viewed by their tenants?
Well, compared to other landlords, they have a very good record. And there's a clock tower in Keena, which we'll visit later in the day, which epitomises the trust they had in the King Harmons. We'll talk about that when we get to Keena.
But that was actually built by the tenants.
By the tenants.
It wasn't-
Now there's a point there now. Maybe, I don't know, but Lawrence Harmon, I mean, he hadn't a bad record as
Yes,
such.
yes.
But the trouble, of course, was the landlord's agent.
Agent, right. I was going to ask you about the agent, indeed.
Now, the agent, he was in a most unenviable position. He had to do the dirty work. And he was the one who would get most blame.
Yes, yes.
Now, the agent for the Harmon estate was Ambrose Bowl. And we'll be talking a little about him when we visit Park Place, where Ambrose Bowl lived.
How far is that from here,
About
Paddy?
3 miles.
About 3 miles,
About 3
yes.
miles, yeah.
Right.
So it's very, very hard to state landlordism in Ireland. It was, in one sense, as I said before, inside the domain wall, it was excellent. Because as well as giving great employment, they also introduced many, many species of trees to Ireland. And I've been a horticulturalist I have, I suppose, somewhat of an affinity in that particular line.
Right.
And to give you an idea of the number of trees that they introduced and planted, in 1840, they planted on the domain alone 24,000 trees in 1 year. So it means fair is fair.
Yes, yes.
Now, they never knew, or rather they knew that they would never see them reach maturity. We see them in maturity. Look all around you.
Yes.
So that they also then were what I'd call the very early agricultural advisors, though before my time. And they would get, you see, they'd be in touch with agricultural practices in England. And they introduced various types and breeds of cattle and sheep and horses. And they also introduced certain drainage methods. Methods of, we say, looking after land in general, fertilizing and draining. And anything that was new, they were in touch with it. And these experiments were carried out on their own estates, on their own domains.
Well, on their domain or on their estate or both?
Well, they would do it on the domain first.
First of all, right.
In the hope
yes.
that the tenants would do it on the,
yes.
on the estate.
Well, now, not all landlords, however, would have been as progressive as the King Harman, should they?
No, I would say not. See, this is the real cancer.
Yes.
Was the absentee landlord.
Right.
He was the real cancer.
But the King Harmans were not absentee landlords.
They
lived here all the time.
They lived and died here.
Yeah. How many acres did they actually own?
In the middle of the last century, they owned around 26,000 acres. Now you could travel from Newcastle to Longford without leaving their land.
Right. And that's a distance of how many?
12 miles.
12 miles.
12 miles.
And now they were the largest landlords in Longford, were they?
Oh yes,
Longford.
oh yes. I'd say that. Now it's very hard to be sure of that, though,
yes.
you know what I mean? But I'd say they would be one of the largest landlords in the county Longford. See, they owned land up in North Longford as well, up around Drumlish, they owned a huge land.
Oh, so in other words, this wasn't their only estate?
No, they had land
yes.
in Drumlish, up in North Longford,
yes.
all land there too.
Did the King Harmans, did they actually own any land outside of Ireland? That you know
I
of?
cannot tell you that.
Yes.
I cannot tell you that.
I mean, a lot of the absentee landlords, I think, were absentee because they had estates in England
yes,
as well, and they lived
exactly,
on their English estates.
Yes. You see, all these estates, now, as I told you before, the King Harmans married into this estate.
Right.
Didn't buy it.
Yes.
Wentworth King Harman married Francis Shepherd. Francis Shepherd bought it. But when he married into the estate, and well, I suppose it's one way of getting an estate.
A very good way of getting it.
Okay, fair enough.
Now, you were talking about the Bowles family. I know you said that
yes.
the position of the land agent wasn't an enviable one, but how were they viewed? How were the Bowles viewed by their tenants?
Now, he wouldn't be a very popular man calling
Right.
to any house, because he was collecting the rents.
Right.
And I suppose even to the present day, it's very, very difficult to extract rents or taxes painlessly.
Right.
Ambrose Bowl, he was born in Maidu, about 7 miles from here. Now, his father and mother, they'd be all right. But Ambrose, he was the only one who was an agent, you see. And he would be distinctly unpopular.
Yes. What kind of a family would he have come from?
He'd have come from a family that would be pretty large landowners. Now, I have the genealogy of the family here. If you'd like me to just run through it for you, give you an idea.
If you would. Now, this is of Bowles,
Of
land
Bowles,
agent.
yes.
Now, when you said a landowner, was he a fairly well-to-do tenant farmer or landowner?
Oh, he'd be a landowner.
He'd be a landowner as well. So he'd be,
yes.
if you like, a mini landlord.
Well, he wouldn't. He'd be probably using all his own land.
Yeah, right. But he did own his land.
He would own maybe
yes.
a couple of 100 acres, you know.
Right,
His father would, and then he did it. Well, now, the genealogy of the Bowl family, John Bowl of Castlecor House, Maidu, that's about 6 miles from here, Donald, and he married Anne Diamond in 1810. And he had issue Mary, born in 1811, Ambrose, the gentleman we're talking about, was born in 1812. He married Elizabeth Ledwith. Now, again, we'll be visiting the Ledwith house and
Right.
he was one of the Ledwith, you see.
Oh,
and
yes.
he married Elizabeth Ledwith. And his sister Elizabeth was born in 1813, and Jane born in 1815, Harriet 1817, John 1819. Now Ambrose Ball, he died at Park Place in 1893. But Ambrose married, as I mentioned before, Elizabeth Ledwith, Ledwith Town House, Kilcomac. And he had issue John born 1843, William 1844, Margaret 1845, Simes 1847, Louise 1849, Ambrose Henry 1851, Edward George 1853, Arthur James William 1854, and Harriet Jane 1856. So that he'd be a man who would have a lot of land too in Park Place.
Yes,
He had a good
yes.
farm there.
Well, from what you've said, it would appear that in fact he was related. He was one of a landlord family.
He was.
Yes.
He was by marriage.
By marriage.
By
Right.
marriage. By marriage.
Right.
The Balls, but they were a pretty large family and would have owned a lot of land around on the area.
Yes,
You know what
yes.
I mean? But you wouldn't refer to them as landlords
Yes.
in this area.
They were landowners.
Landowners.
Right.
Landowners, you see, they
Right.
were now. And the last to around here was Harry Elliot Ball, and he lived in a place called Coal Hill House, and he died a young man. He died at about 38 years of age.
But at that stage he wasn't an
Oh no.
Yes.
Oh no. Actually, he fought in World War I.
All right. So in fact, the people who lived in Coal Hill House, and we'll actually visit there later on.
Yes.
They weren't. The man who lived there wasn't an agent as such.
Oh no.
No. Right.
No.
Well, tell us, Paddy, before we leave Newcastle House, are there any stories, any particular stories that stand out as being characteristic, say, of the King Harmons, or indeed of the Bowles family?
Well, the King Harmon family definitely during the famine period they stood by fairly solid, and they were involved in famine relief schemes of subscriptions and all that, you know.
Yes.
And they also did an awful lot of work around here.
Mm-hmm.
See, after all, 1851 wasn't too far back from the famine.
No.
They did an awful lot of building here, you see.
Yes.
And gave a lot of employment. They would, by general standards now, were pretty good landlords. Pretty good landlords.
And
there is, of course, always isolated incidents.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Now, you know, some people mightn't agree with me, and well, I respect their views.
Yes.
That's all about it.
Well, how did the famine affect this particular
We've
part of the country?
The famine here now, this here you see, it's an area of some of the finest land in Ireland.
Yes.
Now, in Ballymahan, I can find no record of any serious deaths, any serious amount of deaths during the famine period. In 1845, the deaths were less than 1844. There was a slight increase in 1846, but there was a large increase in 1847. That was the last year, and then it dropped
47.
again after 47. But in the parish of Shrule, this here is the parish of Organy, but in the parish of Shrule you had 3 corn mills and you had 1 flour mill.
Yes.
So there'd be a fair amount of employment.
Yes.
And they wouldn't be as totally dependent on the data as they would
Yes.
in other areas. The general rule about the famine is this is what I have found out, that, see, where you had the highest density of population, you had the worst land. And on the west coast, that's where it was, right down along there.
Yes.
And then the climate on the west coast would be far more conducive to the spread of the fungus,
Of course.
Phytophthora infestans, that was the cause of the famine.
Yes.
That I haven't, there may have been some, but from the records I have, it wouldn't be alarming, no, it would not be alarming proportions.
Yes. And just changing the subject for a moment,
Yes.
As we were coming in, you were saying that in fact this was not, the way we came in, was
No.
not the main avenue at all.
The main avenue is, it's It's just down, if you just down there.
Right.
You see it right down, you can see it right down to the end. It's a mile from the main gate to the hall door.
So, in other words, this was part of the original avenue.
Oh, yes.
But it went straight
straight to the forest. Straight to the forest.
Straight to the forest and came out
at Forganey Church.
At Forganey Church, right.
It's a mile.
Which, of course, has associations with Oliver Goldsmith.
That's correct, yes.
Or his father.
Yes, and it has associations with the Harmons too.
And what association did they have with the church?
The Countess of Ross.
Yes.
In 1838, she built the porch and the bell tower.
Yes.
Out of Rome.
Now the Countess of Ross, what connection?
Countess of Ross, she was originally Harmon.
Right.
And she married one of the Rosses.
And here we are now at Castlecor House, which is about a mile from Ballymahan, or about 4 miles from Newcastle House, where we were earlier. Originally, Castlecor was part of the King Harmon estate, but again, to tell us more about its history, is Paddy Whelan.
Yes, well now, Castlecor is known as the architectural curiosity of Ireland. It was built in 2 separate periods. The back portion of the house was built as a hunting lodge by Dean Coates Harmon, who was a member of the Harmon family in Newcastle, but lived in the deanery of Waterford. It was the first portion was built in 1765 and was designed by Davis Dukehart, who was from Stupaninga, and it's a replica of a hunting lodge built for the King of Sardinia. The house itself is most unusual, the focal point being the round room, or great hall, or octagonal room as it's called. Now, it was eventually transferred or inherited by the son of Coates Harmon's niece, Lawrence Harmon. And that would be around 1780. And he rented the house for a period to a Mr. Peyton Johnston. Now, early in the 1800s, the house was purchased by Thomas Hussey, who held his commission in the Royal Marines. Thomas Hussey lived in the house from 1832 until 1854, when, due to some financial difficulties by Captain Hussey, the house was sold under the Encumbered Estates Act. It was sold to a Scotchman called David Dunlap Urquhart for a sum of approximately £6,000. The mansion, the yard, orchards, and 270 acres of land. Urquhart held the house for about 2 years, and he resold it to Thomas Bond for over 7,000. Thomas Bond, who in 1840 purchased nearby Drimnagh House, was a member of the Bond family who owned very large estates in Longford and in counties Westmeath, Meath and Dublin. Thomas Bond was succeeded by his son John Bond, and John Bond was succeeded by his son Smith Bond, who had one child, a daughter, called Constance Emily Bond. In 1902, Constance Emily Bond married Captain Charles James Clark of the 21st Lancers, Marlborough Barracks, and the couple lived in Castlecor in the original house. But in 1913, they added this front structure, a total contrast to the original structure. This structure was designed by Mr. Miller, architect, Dublin. And when we go inside, we'll see how vastly different it is from the original house. Castlecor was sold in 1920 to a local farmer, Mr. Mulvihill, and he sold it around 1948 to Sisters of the Holy Rosary, and the house was used as a novitiate for training young girls for their religious life. They left around the mid-60s, and was bought then by local farmers, who in turn sold it to the present owners, the Porter family, who now use the house as a nursing home. And I must say, it's very well kept, and the staff of the nursing home are known for their efficiency and courtesy. That brings it up to date.
Well, it's rather interesting that, in fact, this was the hunting lodge of the King Harman family.
Yes.
And we saw Newcastle earlier on.
Yes.
Both of them, in fact, after they were sold, were actually sold to religious orders.
Exactly. Unusual, yes. Very unusual. Very unusual indeed. Well, they were big, you see.
Right.
And easily converted into a convent.
Yes.
There was no trouble, like a small house was useless for a community.
Well, the Bonds now, when they bought this house, in fact, they were already landlords in this area.
Oh, they were.
They really only transferred their residence.
That's all. You had the Bonds living in two houses here. One lived at Drumnachar, about a mile from here, about a mile west from here, which is of course a smaller house.
Yes.
And it's now demolished. And they just when the senior member would die, then the next man in line came and lived in Castlecor.
Right. What was the size of the Bond estate? I mean, this is seen in more recent times as the, if you like, the headquarters of the Bond estate.
Oh,
how much land did they have about in this area?
Oh, I'd say it'd be thousands of acres.
Yes, but the land they had in Longford, in the immediate vicinity, wasn't as much as the Harmans had or anything like that.
No.
Yes.
The Harmans would have more. Not more. But the amount of land that I've had here would be much smaller.
Yes.
Much smaller.
And I think
possibly less than 1,000 acres.
I think you can see that the house is certainly not as large as Newcastle House, which we saw earlier on.
No. It was never meant to be a large house.
Yes.
Just a lodge.
Well, again, like I asked you earlier, what kind of landlords were the Bonds?
They were very popular.
They were popular?
Popular, yes. I've never heard anything said derogatory about the Bond family. Never, at any time. They seemed to get on very well with everybody. And unfortunately, that when Captain Clark left here in 1920, well, he was regretted by many.
Yes.
They were very popular.
And their agents, who were their agents?
Well, they wouldn't be big enough to have an agent.
Oh, okay.
In this area.
Yes.
Not in this area, you
yes,
see.
yes. No, I think you said earlier that they had land in Derry as well, is that right?
They would have land from here. No, this is Derry Buntles down near there.
Yes.
No, not the north.
Right.
It's a town land west of here. It's borders the Shannon. They would own lot of land in Derry na Galia, Gurchin, Clarine. This is Castlecor, Darrog Upper. Moy, of course.
Yes.
There's a lot of land in this place, but nothing compared, of course, to the Harmans.
Well, I think
here, that's now here.
Yes.
But by and large, they were huge landlords.
Adding up all their land together.
Yes. Well, there were several families.
Yes.
The Bonds had many families, many branches of the family, much more than the Harmans had in this area, anyway.
Yes.
Well, they were in Farah in Edgerstown, and they were in Newtown Bond was also in Edgerstown.
Yes.
And they originally came from Derry. When actually, the one of them built his own church down in Corboy. He was a Presbyterian minister and built his own church.
So is the Presbyterian church in Corboy?
Yes.
In fact, it was built by one of the Bonds.
Built by the Bonds, yes.
I see.
Built by the first Bond that came here.
Well, I think by just taking these two houses, Newcastle House and Castlecor here, you can see already that not all landlords own the same amount of land, not all lived in the same type of house, that they varied an awful lot.
They lived up and down.
Yes.
And a lot depended on the type of landlord. You see, if he was the type of landlord who was a very heavy gambler. It wasn't so good for the tenants then. And some of them were notorious gamblers. Now, as mentioned before, the absentee landlord, he was the one that was, would be, I'd say, not as well liked.
Well, was that because the agent, in fact, had a freer hand and in some cases abused their position?
No, I think that it was the landlords, many of them were living beyond their means abroad. And they tried to recoup their losses by pushing up the rents.
Pushing up the rents, right.
That was the problem.
Yes.
But the Bonds and the Harmons, they lived here.
Yes.
Which was a great thing for everyone concerned. Now, I know that the last of the Bonds here, Captain Clark and his wife, they were very well liked here. Very well liked here and supported many of the local charities in that. So that you couldn't say that the Bonds were anything but reasonably decent landlords.
Yes.
This is the genealogy of the Harmon family, and the family seat, of course, was Newcastle House, Ballymahan here, and the motto, as I mentioned before, was Spes Tutissima Coelius. Now, Nicholas Harmon of Carlow settled in Ireland in the reign of James I, 1614, was High Sheriff of County Carlow, 1619. By his wife Mary, he was the father of Henry Harmon of Dublin, who, by his wife Maeve, had 5 sons and 5 daughters: Edward, William, Anthony, Thomas, Sir Thomas, Henry, Anne, Mary, Jane, Margaret, Mabel. Now, Henry Harmon died circa 1649. He was succeeded by his son, Sir Thomas, who was knighted in 1664, MP for Carlow, 1689, and was a major in the army in 1661. Under the Act of Settlement, now listen to this, this is a point that concerns us. Under the Act of Settlement, in 1607, he obtained a grant of considerable estates in County Longford. His wife, Anne Jones, was granted lands in County Carlow. Now, those are the estates in North Longford.
Yes.
Don't misunderstand me. Sir Thomas died in 1667. Anne, his widow, died 1683. Issue. Mary married firstly Sir Arthur Jones, Knight of Osbaldeston, County Meath, and secondly William Morton, Doctor of Divinity, Bishop of Meath. Second child, Captain Wentworth Harmon, Battle Axe Guards, Castlecor, County Carlow, married in 1679 Margaret, the daughter of Garrett Wesley, Dangan, Kings County. Margaret Harmon died in 1683. Now, the issue here was Thomas, Wentworth, and Elizabeth. Now, we come now to the area concerning Newcastle. Captain Wentworth Harmon married his second wife, Frances, sister and heir of Anthony Shepherd, Newcastle House, Ballymahan, June 1691. Now, he married her before. She was the heir. So when Anthony Shepherd died, and she was the last one, Harmon then acquired Newcastle.
Right.
That'd be 1738.
Right.
Now, by his second wife, issue, Anthony William Robert, born 1699, married Anne, the daughter of John Warburton, Gary Hinch, Kings County. Cooch Harmon, now we'll talk about him later on. Cooch Harmon, born 1706. Very Reverend Dean Cooch Harmon was entered to the deanery in 1759. He married Bridget, the daughter of Sir George Gore. They live about 6 miles from here at a place called Tenalick. You know them, I'm sure. Sir George Gore. And the sister, he married the daughter of Sir George Gore and the sister of John, Lord Annally, Tenalick, County Longford. The Dean died in 1784. Bridget Harmon died 1762. Now there was no issue. Now Wentworth King Harmon, LLD TCD, Moyne County Carlow, succeeded his father. Married in 1714 Lucy, the daughter of Audley Mervyn of Trillick, County Tyrone. Issue. Wesley Thomas. Anne, who married, now here we come into the Ross part now, Donal. Anne, who married in 1742 Sir Lawrence Parsons, 3rd Baronet, Birdcastle. Now, this is the man who had to take the name Harmon to get the estates. See,
Right.
The mail line had broken there.
Yes, yes.
Gone there. So Anne, issue Wesley Thomas, Anne Lawrence. Now Anne married. Anne married Sir Lawrence Parsons, 3rd Baronet of Birdcastle. Now, Wentworth Harmon died in 1757. He was succeeded by his son, his eldest son Wesley, who died 58. Wesley was succeeded by his uncle Robert Harmon, Ballymahan, who died 661. And there was only one left, Coates Harmon.
Yes.
And he inherited the estate here and Castlecor, visiting later on.
Mm-hmm.
And he then bequeathed the estate of Newcastle and Castlecor to the son of his niece, Lawrence Parsons. Now that brings us into the Lady Ross part.
Yes.
And second now, please, we'll get her here in a second. It's rather complicated, I'll admit. It was a hell of a job to do it. Now, Lawrence Parsons Harmon, MP Newcastle, assumed the additional name of Harmon when he succeeded to his uncle's estates. He was born in 1749 and married in 1772 Jane King, daughter of the first Earl of Kingston, and his wife Jane, Lady Jane King, daughter of the first Earl of Kingston, and his wife Jane, the daughter of Thomas Caulfield, Dunamon, County Roscommon. Lawrence Parsons Harmon was created Lord Oxmanton in 792 and Earl of Ross in 806. He died in 807. The Countess of Ross died in 838. So
right.
That's where that came in.
Yes.
So that brings us on then.
Well, the Countess of Ross, she lived
here.
Lived here, right?
Lived here.
Okay.
She lived here after.
And
well, there's some reports about it that she left here, and left the place idle for 30 years. It's gone to rack and ruin. The next fellow got it.
I see. But that can't be verified, can it?
I have no documentary of it.
No. But she was the person anyway who built the addition to Forgney Church.
Forgney Church, and she also built the one in Keena.
Yes.
Now, Lady Frances Parsons Harmon, Newcastle Ballyman, married in 1799 Robert Edward, 1st Viscount Lorton, Rockingham Boyle. Now that's where the Rockingham comes in, 1854. Issue, Robert Lawrence Harmon, Jane, Caroline, Frances Louise. Now, we have the man now who built this, the great builder, Lawrence Harmon King Harmon. He took a surname too, you see.
Right.
And he got married also. The Honourable Lawrence Harmon King Harmon, who took the additional surname Harmon, he was born in 1816 and married in 1837, Mary Cecilia, the daughter of James Raymond Johnston Alva Clackmanman. Now, issue, Lieutenant Robert, 60th Rifles, born in 1838. He was in the Royal Bengal Artillery, believe it or not. Now, Colonel E. Wentworth, Royal Artillery, born in 1840. Lieutenant George Douglas, 2nd Regiment, born in 1845. Charles Anthony, born in 1851. Commander Lycidius, Royal Navy, born 1853. Colonel Wentworth King Harmon married Anne Case, the daughter of D.J. Smith, Ontario, Canada. He died in 1919. His wife, Anne Case, died in 1926. Now, this is the last bit now. Issue, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Wentworth King Harmon, Royal Irish Rifles, born in 1869, died at Newcastle, Ballyman, 1849. And he was the last member of the King Harmon family to reside in Newcastle.